This is the Stovetop of Memory. So I always have two projects. I always have like an A game and a B game. And I know that I can take advantage of my muscle memory when I have a 6-spot stove. I always have something on the back, something on the front. So this is how I've kind of lined it all up. You have a front burner list and a back burner list for your projects. And there's three kinds of vessels. There's a stock pot, a saucepan, and a saute pan. For the front projects, for the A game, and for the back projects in the B game. So the stock pot represents something deep. You're putting in some seaweed, you're kind of allowing a slow infusion. It sounds like a bubbling. You're kind of extracting the essence of something. And it also doesn't matter if you mess it up. You could throw any vegetable into a stock pot and make a good stock. The saucepan is kind of the main project that you're working on, a la minute. You're creating there, you're doing the act of creating. There's always room for improvement. It's kind of easier to mess things up, but there's still room for improvement. You're always reducing, simmering, and whisking. Whereas the saute pan is for these, for project management, is for something very quick and flash. You're just frying up a piece of fish, maybe sauteing a lobe of foie gras. It's a very critical component of the project, whereas this is more of the stock pot represents something that's a more deep, fundamental component, and the saucepan is kind of like your main creative work. And so you still have to be able to jump to the back burner and fry something up, or jump to the back burner and throw some sort of vegetable into the stock pot. But you're still working on your A game and your B game for your projects. But it's a lot about listening and a lot about letting your muscle memory kind of take care of certain things. And this is everything you're doing on the A burner is actually cross-pollinating the B burner, and it's a very efficient way to get things done.
One thing that I like is the way you're using food metaphors, of course, and that's fun to use that for work and process. It seems very natural. Why?
Well, I think that much as early Romans and medieval scribes would use this palace of memory, the idea of overlaying your spatial memory on your memorization memory, I think it's the same thing with using your muscle memory of cooking with your organizing memory. Mm-hmm. You're remembering that, oh, the stock has been bubbling for 20 minutes, it's time to throw this one thing in it now. You're remembering that, oh, it's time for me to put a little bit of butter in this back saucepan, and that the cooking headset, the cooking headspace is this weird, it's very temporal. When you think about a recipe, you say, well, I've got to get the flour, and I've got to get the sugar, and I've got to, get the chicken that should have been marinated 2 hours ago. So you're always kind of going forward in the timeline and backward in the timeline, and it's kind of a special part of your brain, and you're just overlapping your tendency to get things done and keep track of your project management with this sort of cooking metaphor. It only really works if you're used to cooking all the time and letting your muscle memory kind of take over your project management.
Do you feel that this kind of thing in your day-to-day working environment, that these are like, is it just a question of having kind of breaking things into three buckets, or are there other kinds of mental challenges you face? Like, is this just coordinating, organizational, or is there, what other kinds of obstacles do you face in working?
Right. Well, I think this is the kind of when everything's broken up into little bite-sized work items, it's very easy to approach things this way, but there's this abstraction on top of this, which is creativity, which is expressing yourself and realizing that as you make this Japanese stock that already has seaweed in it, if you put some dried mushrooms in it, it's going to, that's just the base component of a future project that's maybe 8 steps ahead. But you have to be creative enough, sort of like chess, to think about the implications of this one, infusion of an essence into that stock when you're going to be simmering a pumpkin with that stock later. You're going to think about how the shiitake mushrooms kind of affect that. So the real challenge is expressing yourself and knowing who you're cooking for, and having this layer of creativity on top of this building block organizational structure, which is all based upon, is it something that needs to be dealt with right away, or is it something that's slow and can infuse, or is it just your main project that you're working on? And then of course the front and the back being your front project, your main project, but you can always move things back to the back burner if you need to.
So I hear that part of what's keeping you responsible is having an audience, having somebody who's going to eat that meal, or having somebody who wants it, and having that's kind of a draw or a pull towards the goal.
Right, well, I think that's part of any kind of creativity. When you write a song, you're thinking about the people who are going to listen to it and possibly sing along with it. When you write a book, you're always thinking about the reader. And when you're cooking, you're always thinking about the audience. You're always thinking, like, is this for Thanksgiving dinner? Is this for someone's birthday? Mm-hmm. Am I making a comfort food? Am I making mashed potatoes for someone that they grew up eating this? Or is it something that's totally weird and foreign? And that's just one set of vectors on the culinary expression chart.
How well does this process work with a team? So you have a bunch of people, and they're all cooks, and you big kitchen,
Right.
And everybody wants to be the cook, the head
Right,
chef.
right. So this is actually interesting because there's a brigade system. This is another thing I want to talk about, which is the brigade system of organizing. And Escoffier basically, perfected the brigade system in a kitchen, which is everyone has their station. There's not like two people walking around and touching the stove. The person who's on the stove is always on the stove, and the person who's on the fryer is always on the fryer, and the person who's on the pot of soup is always making the pot of soup, and the person who's grilling the steak is always grilling the steak. And this is it's a leadership development metaphor where you basically ends up the best person, the person who's been in each of those stations becomes the sous chef, kind of becomes the all-around anchor in the kitchen. So when the fry cook is gone, don't worry, I've done the frying before, I know exactly how to do it. So it's a leadership development metaphor where you have, you rotate each station and go into it, so that if I see you at this stove of memory and I recognize that pot has been boiling for too long, I can just go turn it off for you, and it's part of, my understanding of your project and where you're at is helping me kind of train you a little bit of how to use that technique or how to use that equipment.
So it's verbalization and communication. Do you think that it might actually work better then with a team of people who are all communicating loudly in a shared project space and where they each have an understanding of each other?
Yeah, I think this process in particular works well for people who are used to being creative in a kitchen. But I think it's also having experience at the different supper clubs that we've done at the Unicorn Precinct. It's a training aspect as well. You take someone who's not ready to be on the stove and you put them on the stove and you say, you're going to fry this and it's got to sizzle super loud, and you got to make, when this thing starts separating, turn it off and start whisking it and put butter into it. And every piece of vegetable that we give you, throw into this stock pot. You're in charge of this, right? So it's all about that knowing the skill level of all the people around you is a big key of the Kitchen Brigade system. It's just knowing that this person's new on the fryer, this person's an old hand on the soup station, but also used to work the fish station. So if that person goes to the bathroom, or if that person gets horribly disfigured, this person can step in and step up to it. So it's more about just knowing where everyone in your team is at on their skill level, and hopefully where everyone is learning, how everyone learns.
This is something that kind of seems very professional and athletic, like you've reached a pitch of energy and motivation where you're able to successfully execute. And how do you speak to, say you're bringing that new person, how do you create the motivation and energy and focus for them to grow up and succeed in that kind of environment?
Yeah, well, ultimately it's the love of the people who are eating, and it's harder to do it in restaurants. But if we have dinner parties here where someone's cooking for their entire family. So family comes over, and you just put someone in front and say, you're going to saute these carrots, you're going to make this butter sauce, and your friends are going to eat it, and they're going to love you. So of course, you're opening up an opportunity for someone to express themselves creatively and cook food for someone that they love. And I think that's a lot harder to conjure when you're in a professional kitchen, because you're getting paid to summon up your love just for that moment and make this steak the way you would make it for your mother, who really loves steak. You have to kind of summon that, and it's a lot easier when it's not in a restaurant environment, when you're cooking for your social network, when you're cooking for your friends and family.